This is the orange. Let's submerge it in the water. When I've taken the peel off, which is now making it less mass, clean, you see, let's drop it in. Oh boy, we already see an issue.
Welcome everyone. It seems Flatzoid has gone and done an experiment, and Rachie50 has already called him out on what he did and, more importantly, what he didn't do. I encourage you to go over and check out her video for her take on it. I have linked Rachie's and Flatzoid's videos in the description below.
This is an orange. We're going to use this for the science experiment today. What is postulated? Well, gravity says that if you increase the mass, it will accelerate towards the ground. But what happens if we decrease the mass? Should it mean it has more of a buoyant force acting upon it from the other side, which would cause it to go up? This is going to be an interesting experiment. Let's do this. The scientific method. It's an empirical method strictly there to establish the cause for an effect observed in nature. Step 1. You will observe a natural phenomena. This would be, for instance, an orange falling to the ground. Number 2. You will do your research to see if anybody else has observed this natural phenomena and done any scientific research on this phenomena. Step 3. You create a hypothesis. This would be your postulation on what the cause for the effect is observed in nature.
I think he has steps 2 and 3 backwards. But hey, it's his version of the scientific method, so I guess he can do the steps in the order he wants. There are many different kinds of science. Though nature can be studied via science, it has nothing to do with science itself. Science means the study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world, including the universe and everything in it.
Number 4, you make a prediction. What will the experiment yield? And number 5, you do the actual experiment. This experiment in detail requires you to manipulate the independent variable, which is the cause, to see the dependent variable, which is the effect observed, to happen. If you do not manipulate the independent variable, there is no way to validate if that was the cause for the dependent variable's effect. And number 6, you analyze the results. This comes after the experiment. Then you take the analyzation of those results and you move on to number 7, which is systematic experimentation. This is experimentation built upon the data from your analysis from the experiment. Then you move on to peer review. Peer review is simply sending the data onto someone else, sending it on to your peers to be able to review it, to do the experiment for themselves, and to either validate or invalidate the results. In essence, this is a peer review right now.
Wrong!
No it's not. Peer-reviewed doesn't mean watching it be done or listening to your various steps. It means others repeating your experiment to see if they get the same results.
Okay, let's move on to observe natural phenomena. When an object is no longer supported by someone or something, it will fall, accelerate downwards from the elevation to the ground. So this would be me picking up an orange and letting it go, and it falls to the ground. This is the natural observed phenomena. Number 2, we do research. What was the research based on this phenomena? The research tells us that the cause for this falling acceleration is from the concept named gravity. This concept is very vague and has no actual definition or cause for its origins. There is 2 explanations of this. Newtonian gravity, it's a force. And Einsteinian gravity, it's not a force. Weird, as they both contradict one another, but want to be used in the same pond. Gravity is either explained in two ways. It is a force of attraction between two masses that accelerate the objects of mass towards each other, or the latter, which is Einstein, is proposed that there is no force at all. The proposition that the space around the object will warp in the fourth dimension, as adding time with space, creates a conceptual fabric to bend. This bending of the space-time fabric is what causes the uneven distribution of those masses, and thus causes the masses to accelerate towards each other.
Or we can believe the greatest mind of the 21st century, Anthony Riley, aka Sleeping Warrior, and believe it's refraction.
Oh, dearie dear.
The argument is that the more mass, the stronger the apparent attractiveness. The larger the mass will always create a larger divot in the surrounding space, and thus the smaller mass will tend to accelerate faster to the larger mass the closer it is. It's as if the mass is following a path over a slope. Another proposed argument is relative density disequilibrium. This postulation is based upon the uneven distribution ratio of the object and the medium that it is submerged in. The object's ratio depends on the medium determined by the relative direction to acceleration.
It says the object's ratio dependent on the medium determines the relative direction of the acceleration.
If the medium is able to support the object's displacement, it will accelerate it upward until it finds its relative equilibrium state. If the medium is not able to support the object's displacement, it will accelerate downward till it finds its relative equilibrium state. This proposition is based not on the mass, but the ratio difference between the object and the mass. So in other words, the displacement ratios. The displacement shows the distribution of the pressure over the surface area to give its difference on observation. Just as you would see a huge container ship with thousands of tons able to float on the ocean, and with a bowling ball only a few kilograms able to sink. Now, if we had to flatten out that bowling ball, it would displace enough pressure over the surface that thus it will not sink. This postulation shows that it's not the mass that causes the acceleration, but the distribution based on the ratio between the object and the medium. Number 3, we create the hypothesis. Since the consensus is based on gravity, we will hypothesize and experiment on them first.
After seeing step 2, he did get steps 2 and 3 backwards. He is putting the cart before the horse with his proposed arguments. Step 3, create hypothesis, should actually be step 2, since his hypothesis is, does the orange fall down due to gravity, or could there be another explanation?
Let's start with Newtonian gravity. Newtonian's law of gravitation statement that any particle of matter in the universe attracts any other with a force varying directly as a product of the masses and inversely as the square of the distance between them. So in other words, the larger mass will attract the smaller mass more, and the distance between them would give them a different accelerative rate. Create an hypothesis. Still, the mass of an object determines the amount of force the object will be attracted to. It's the largest mass. If it moves the mass, it should show less attractive force and thus not accelerate at the same rate towards the ground as when shown to have more mass. IV, this is the independent variable. IV would be mass. Mass is the cause for the attractive acceleration. dV is the observed natural phenomena. So it's the dependent variable. It depends on the independent variable. Without manipulating the independent variable, you are not able to get the observed phenomena, which is the dependent variable, the effect. So remember, you have to physically manipulate the mass in this situation to get the effect observed. What is the effect? More mass would show acceleration towards the larger mass. In this case, the ground. So the orange would go downward to the larger mass, which would be Earth, if it's mass that causes the acceleration. The null is the antithesis of the hypothesis. So if it is validated, it means your hypothesis is invalidated. If the null is invalidated, your hypothesis is validated. This is a prove situation. You either prove your hypothesis or you prove your null. No matter how many times you do this experiment, it will always be either proven or disproven.
Flatzoid, science doesn't prove. Your experiment will yield results, but those results don't mean proof one way or another. That is where real peer review of repeated testing to disprove your experiment comes into play by many others.
Mass has increased and yet shows not to accelerate to the ground. Number 4, make a prediction. If I remove the mass of the object, in this case the peel around the orange, in the fish tank it will show, based upon the postulation, the orange will have less mass and thus have less attractive force. This postulates that the orange will either remain at the same position or it will go up as the counterbalance forces will be stronger. More mass means down to larger mass. Less mass, same or goes up away from the large mass due to buoyant forces. Experimentation. Fish tank filled with water. Orange with its peel placed inside the water to see if it sinks and its relative position from the placement. Removing the peel is represent less mass of the orange. See if it makes a difference in either its relative position or floats up due to less mass. So in other words, we stick the orange in the water with its peel, it has more mass. If we remove the peel, it now has less mass. The control variables, this is the CV. These are the things that you keep controlled to know that you are keeping a controlled environment for your experiment. The control variables in this experiment are: the water is kept at a constant temperature, water level stays constant, it has the same duration of time lapse, so you see if it's not going to change with a different duration. The same orange was used. Remove air pockets of the exterior of the orange peel so there wouldn't be any air bubbles holding the orange up to give a null result. And it's kept in the same container.
Attention all students. It's time to sit down, shut up, and learn.
We are going to keep track of his control variables to see if he follows them.
This is the orange. Let's submerge it in the water.
Already we see he has not adhered to water kept at a constant temperature. He did no measurement of the temperature for us to see, nor is there any temperature gauge for him to keep track of the water's temperature in sight. That's one demerit for this experiment.
As you can see, it is floating. This is a bit counterintuitive, as you would think this is the structure where it has the most mass. So therefore it would be needing to attract to the Earth, which would be the larger mass. Maybe it could be the air bubbles in the pores that's holding this up. Let's clean the air bubbles off. See, we're cleaning it off, making sure that there is no air bubbles in, just as the control says.
It appears he failed at water level stays constant, as he never showed with a ruler or mark on the fish tank just where the water level is. I added the line for this purpose, but as you can see, his camera is at an angle and the line is not quite level on the screen. That's another demerit for this experiment, which brings this to 2 demerits so far.
Nope, it's still seeming to float. So definitely not the air bubbles holding the orange up. What do you think will happen when we remove the peel, which is removing the mass? See, I'm cutting the peel off and we're going to peel it off so it has less mass. So less mass based on the gravity postulation would mean that the orange should now float easier or be even less submerged. Let's see what's going to happen when I've taken the peel off, which is now making it less mass, and sticking it back into the water. Just waiting for me to pull all the extra mass off. There we go, looks nice and clean, you see. Let's drop it in. Oh boy, we already see an issue. It seems to be lower.
It is lower in the water because he took off the peel, which is porous and filled with air pockets, which help it stay buoyant. However, it is still floating and not sinking. Though he passes for same orange used, remove air pockets on the exterior of the orange, I am guessing he means the peel and air bubbles, and kept in same container, he gets yet another demerit for not having a timer on the screen for same duration of time lapse.
There's an issue here. Less mass means it's gone lower.
Hold on. In the process of wiping off the air bubbles, Flatzoid opened the orange with his fingers so water could get inside of it. That act effectively nullifies his experiment.
Maybe there's some air bubbles still in. Let's just clean it off again to give it control. Okay, got rid of all the air bubbles inside, which would give it buoyancy. Now we've taken that air bubbles out. It seems to have sunk. So this doesn't show a great result for gravity, does it? This shows strictly that it's the displacement of the object to the medium. This has been shown now to validate relative density disequilibrium.
No, this shows that his experiment was not controlled at all, that he opened the orange with his fingers to allow water in, and that he purposely placed it on the bottom of the tank. Of course, we should get to the last steps in his version of the scientific method so we can see what he thinks his experiment showed.
Then we move on to analyze the results. After doing the experiment, we were able to observe that mass is not the cause for the acceleration between two masses, but the ratio of the displacement between them. This has shown that the ratio between the object and the medium relies solely on one another, and the relationship of direction between the two is dependent on only its displacement relationship. This shows that if the medium is able to support the object based on the displacement, it will direct the object in the relative equilibrium point and thus sit at rest until acted upon by a force. This uneven distribution of the object and the medium is what causes the movement, and thus, in its entirety, has proven to manifest its own fictitious force. This determination means and keeps with Newton's second law of motion. Then we can move on to systematic experimentation. We can do this experiment in many different ways, such as changing not the object's mass, but the medium's density. We can use different density ratios in objects. We can use different types of liquids. We can change the temperature of the medium or object. At the end of the day, it comes down to proving the cause for the effect observed. Yes, I said it. Prove. You either prove it caused it, or you disprove it caused it. You either prove your hypothesis, or you disprove your hypothesis, which would either prove or validate the null. You can't have it both ways. We move on to 8, which you guys are doing right now, peer review. Well, that's it, what you are doing now, exactly, like I said. What did we observe? Mass does not attract mass. So what does this mean? Gravity does not exist. It's just relative density disequilibrium.
The lie detector determined that was a lie.
As I previously said, this whole experiment is null and void, and what it really means is, you gotta lie to Flurf. You know, besides not having 3 of the controls Flatzoid said he would have, he didn't appear to be wearing any protective gear like Dell when he was doing his water level experiment. Don't forget to do all the YouTube-y things like, share, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and click the bell notification and click all to get notified when I upload new content. Thank you for watching. You are all awesome. See you in the next video.